Book 3, Chapter 5, Scales of Judgment. The ruins of Thunder Tree loomed before them like an open wound upon the landscape. Broken buildings jutted from overgrown earth, their roofs caved in, their windows dark and hollow. Above them, the sky hung low and gray, promising rain but withholding it, as if even the heavens held their breath over this forsaken place. Zira trembled. Something in the atmosphere itself felt wrong, corrupted. The elven girl's plea from her dream echoed through her mind.
Zira, please don't let me die.
It wasn't just memory, it was a summons, growing more insistent with each step closer to the ruined village. The thin tendril of smoke rising from the chimney made her stomach clench. It reminded her too much of the writhing chains of smoke that had bound the elven girl in her nightmare. Karma's harsh voice cut through her reverie.
Miss Darkmeyer, if you're quite finished with your contemplations, we have work to do.
He turned his steel-gray gaze to assess the group, his expression as unforgiving as Winterstone. Balin sniffed the air, detecting something the others could not.
That smoke. Someone's here.
His beard was braided tightly for battle, his hands already flexing toward the two-handed sword strapped across his back. Doreen adjusted the buckles on her leather armor, silencing their jingle.
Wonderful,
she whispered.
Just once, couldn't we find a nice abandoned ruin that's actually abandoned?
Even Elara appeared lucid today, his eyes clear for the first time in weeks, as he positioned himself protectively near Zira. The doll's head, Lily, was nowhere to be seen, though he never truly parted from it. Karma's eyes narrowed as he took in the group. After a moment's consideration, he gave a curt nod toward Doreen.
Scout ahead. Let's inspect the source of that smoke.
The rogue nodded, melting away into the shadows with practiced ease. Zira watched her go, fighting the urge to call her back. Something about this place made her want to keep everyone close. They followed Doreen's path at a distance, Karma leading with measured strides. Zira found herself glancing repeatedly toward the tower ruins, searching for... she wasn't sure what. The pull in her chest was undeniable. 50 meters into the village, a rustling sound broke the eerie silence. Beside Doreen, a tree seemed to shiver despite the still air.
Doreen!
Zira called out, her voice shattering the quiet. Too late. The tree exploded into motion as 5 humanoid figures constructed entirely of twisted twigs, and branches burst from the undergrowth. Their faces were crude approximations of human features, mouths opening to reveal nothing but hollow darkness.
Twig blights,
Doreen gasped, stumbling backward as more of the creatures emerged from another cluster of vegetation.
Fall back!
Karma bellowed, drawing Talon with a metallic hiss as he charged forward. Balin was already moving, his massive sword cutting a gleaming arc through the air.
Wood burns,
he shouted matter-of-factly. Total of 9 blights surrounded them in a loose semicircle of animated plant matter.
Protect Eli!
Elara cried, interposing himself between Zira and the nearest creature, his twin blades flashing in the sunlight. Zira bristled.
I don't need...
she began, then caught herself. This was not the time. Instead, she channeled her frustration into power, feeling heat build within her chest, and fire leapt from her fingertips, engulfing the nearest twig blight.
Balin left flank,
Karma commanded, his voice carrying across the battlefield. The dwarf grunted acknowledgement, sweeping his blade in wide arcs that sent twigs and branches flying. 3 of the creatures converged on him, but they might as well have attacked a stone wall. Balin's face remained impassive as he methodically dismembered them, piece by wooden piece. Doreen had recovered her composure and now shot arrow after arrow, piercing the creatures and severing limbs with surgical precision.
These things better have something valuable inside them,
she grumbled.
I hate monsters that don't carry purses.
Karma fought with cold efficiency, Talon's enchanted blade cleaving through the animated wood like it was parchment. His expression never changed, not even when one of the creatures raked its wooden claws across his cheek, drawing blood. He simply pivoted and removed its head with a single, perfect strike. Ilara fought with wild eyes, movements erratic but devastatingly effective.
Stay away from her.
He snarled at a twig blight that had circled toward Zira. His blades became a blur, reducing the creature to kindling in seconds. Within minutes, it was over. 9 twisted wooden forms lay scattered across the ground, in various states of dismemberment.
What in hells? Things made of twigs.
Balin grunted, crushing the last remains beneath his heavy boot.
Strange magic. Not natural.
Twig blights.
Karma answered tersely.
Corrupted plant life. Usually servants of something worse.
Zyra's sense of unease deepened. This wasn't right. This wasn't where they needed to be. Her eyes drifted beyond the village until they fixed upon the tower, standing alone on a hill beyond the village proper. Something in her chest constricted painfully.
There. She's there. We're wasting time.
Stealth is pointless now.
Karma suddenly declared, striding boldly toward the open front door, which stood slightly ajar. His approach to tactics had all the subtlety of a thunderstorm, but Zira had to admit there was something to be said for bold action when stealth had already failed.
Karma, wait!
Zira began, but he was already stepping through the doorway. The trap was sprung with practiced precision. 3 figures in dark robes stood waiting, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods marked with the 5-headed dragon sigil of Tiamat. They had been expecting him, and, as one, they raised their hands and began chanting in the harsh, guttural tongue of draconic magic. They cried in unison. Unholy fire, a sickening vortex of chromatic energy, erupted around Karma. He felt the familiar, leeching cold that had nearly claimed him at the lighthouse, but this time he was ready.
By Hor's unwavering gaze, you shall not find me wanting,
he muttered, the words a shield of faith. The flames licked at his armor, but the worst of their power was deflected, his prayer a bulwark against their profane magic.
You dare!
Karma snarled, raising Talon, but the cultists did not relent. One darted to the fireplace, stuffing fistfuls of documents into the flames. The other 2, sacrificial daggers gleaming, lunged at the paladin. The doorway became a brutal bottleneck of flashing steel and grunts. Karma planted himself there, determined to hold the line. Shield high, sword ready, he became a living barrier between his allies and the chaos within. For a moment it seemed he might stop the cultists in their tracks, but these were no ordinary foes. The 2 cultists fought like demons, each hand wielding a dagger, while 3 spectral blades whirled in the air around them, 7 gleaming edges, striking from impossible angles like the limbs of some arcane, blade-limbed horror. The enchanted weapons hissed and shrieked against Karma's armor, occasionally slipping through a seam to draw blood. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and the tide was rising. Doreen darted in and out beside him, her rapier flashing like lightning, trying to draw the cultists' attention, to break their rhythm, to buy Karma a moment's breath. She struck when she could, fast and deadly, but even her precision and speed could not stem the flurry. Together they gave ground inch by inch. Karma bled from 6 shallow wounds, his shield arm shaking under the relentless blows. Every step back was hard fought, but the doorway was slipping from his grasp. While the battle raged at the door, Zira and Ilara reached a shuttered window at the rear of the house. With a shared unspoken urgency, they clawed at the weathered planks. Wood groaned and splintered. Ilara, with a surge of desperate strength, ripped the frame from its hinges. He dove through the opening head first, tumbling into the room beyond with feline grace. The cultist by the fireplace spun, his face a mask of shock, just as Ilara's blade found his ribs. In the doorway, the dynamic shifted instantly. One of the cultists glanced over his shoulder, a fatal mistake. Karma's blade whistled through the air, finding the exposed flesh of the man's neck. Blood fountained as the cultist collapsed. The dam had broken.
Push forward!
Karma commanded, surging into the room. Doreen slipped past the doorway, her rapier finding a kidney, and Balin's sword finishing the last cultist with a blow that nearly cleaved the man in two. Karma stood amidst the carnage, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple, but his posture betrayed no pain. His gaze lingered on Ilara, something unspoken passing through his mind.
It wasn't me this time.
Karma thought, an unfamiliar sensation creeping through him.
Nor Balin, it was the madman who turned the tide.
Ilara's flanking attack had broken the cultists' formation and likely saved lives.
Well fought.
He said quietly. Ilara's hollow gaze flickered toward him for just a moment before returning to Zira. Doreen was already kneeling by the fireplace, pulling charred fragments from the flames with her dagger tip.
Karma, you need to see this.
She called, her voice tight with concern. Together they pieced together what remained of the burning documents. Most had been reduced to ash, but enough survived to piece together fragments of text.
Iran Thalor buried beneath the ashen hills since fire fell from the mountain.
The cult had found a tunnel back in. Black robes, worm sigils, and Balak tending something ancient beneath the ash.
Something alive. If it wakes, all may burn again.
At the bottom, a scorched map showed the ashen hills, a faint circle marked
Mind passage, recent. This confirms our intelligence,
Karma said grimly.
The cult of the dragon has found something in the hills. Something they believe can be awakened.
But Zyra heard none of it. Her attention was drawn outward, her gaze locked onto a crumbling stone tower perched on the hill. She froze, a gasp catching in her throat. The dream returned with the force of a physical blow. The elven girl's face, pale with terror, her voice a desperate plea for help.
That's where she is!
The certainty hit Zira like a physical blow, so strong it nearly drove her to her knees.
She's in that tower, and she's running out of time.
Zira turned to Karma, her composure shattered. Her eyes were wide, pleading.
Please, Paladin,
She whispered, her voice trembling.
we have to go now. Her life is in danger.
Karma looked up from the charred map, his brow furrowed. He met her gaze, and for a long moment, time seemed suspended between them. A dozen dismissals, a dozen rebukes about female hysteria and undisciplined emotion rose to his lips, but they died unspoken. He studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. Only fear, only certainty. He didn't understand it. By all rights, he should dismiss this as another example of feminine irrationality. But something in her voice, in her eyes, it reminded him of the moments when Hor's guidance came not through prayer but through certainty that defied logic. Then, as if compelled by something greater than himself, Karma slowly nodded,
We head for the tower.
not taking his eyes from hers.
Now!
Without another word, Karma broke into a run, his armor clanking as he pushed through the ruins toward the distant hill. Zira felt a surge of grateful relief, so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Whatever his flaws, whatever his prejudices, Karma Ral was a man who understood duty, and in this moment, he had chosen to trust her. As Karma and Zyra raced ahead, propelled by their shared unspoken urgency, and Alara followed closely in their wake, Doreen lingered in the doorway of the ruined house. She waited until the others had disappeared among the crumbling walls, then drew her rapier. Her movements were swift and methodical as she moved from one fallen cultist to the next, plunging her blade deep into each chest with a grim finality. It was a precaution. Never leave an enemy behind. When the task was completed, she suddenly noticed Balin standing outside, his face a mask of dwarven stoicism, watching her. Their gazes locked for a short, silent moment. Then, without a word, Doreen sheathed her weapon, turned, and ran to rejoin the others, leaving Balin standing before the cottage, his eyes following her until she was gone. Karma led them at a punishing pace toward the tower. Each stride was deliberate, powerful, carrying him inexorably forward, even as his mind reeled with confusion.
Why am I doing this?
He wondered.
Why am I following a woman's intuition, her feelings? I should know better.
Normally, he would dismiss such things as female hysteria, the fragile temperament of the weaker sex clouding rational judgment. Yet here he was, leading his men and women, his mind reluctantly amended, toward an unknown danger based solely on Zira Darkmire's emotional certainty. Perhaps Hor had guided his decision. Perhaps this was divine will working through Zira, using her as an unwitting vessel. Or perhaps
she's bewitched me,
he thought darkly, his grip tightening on Talon's hilt.
No.
He dismissed the thought almost immediately. Zira might be as emotional and illogical as they came, but she would not invade his mind. Of that much, at least, he was certain. The path began to slope upward as they reached the base of the hill. Before them stretched a massive web, gleaming with dew in the weak sunlight. It spanned at least 10 meters, blocking the path completely.
Careful.
Doreen warned, hanging back.
Where there's web, there's...
Spiders.
Karma finished grimly, drawing Talon. A skittering sound from above completed her thought. A giant spider, its body a bloated sack of black hair, and its legs bristling with chitinous spines, unfurled itself. Then 2 more appeared, their eyes glinting with predatory hunger. They scuttled onto the web, their movements unnervingly silent. One of them reared back and spat a glob of gray, viscous silk. It struck Karma square in the chest, hardening on impact, entangling his arms and pinning him in an impossibly tough, sticky cocoon. He roared in frustration as a fierce battle erupted around him. But the fight did not last long. Zira, driven by an urgency that bordered on panic, unleashed a torrent of primal power. A massive fire orbs, far larger than any she had summoned before, roared from her hands and engulfed 2 of the spiders in a searing inferno. They vanished in a scream of incinerated silk and chitin. Doreen, seizing the moment, loosed an arrow that found the 3rd spider's central eye, felling it in a twitching heap. For a moment there was only the crackle of the dying flames. Karma stood motionless, wrapped in hardening silk, staring at the charred remains of the spiders. He and Alara would have been easy prey, wrapped in cocoons, paralyzed by venom, awaiting a slow death as their organs liquefied for the spiders to consume. Instead, Zira and Doreen had dispatched the threat with ruthless efficiency.
Women,
he thought, the word carrying none of its usual disdain. Karma remembered Baldur's Gate, the siege, the smell of smoke and steel, and the cloying perfume of the women who flirted from the battlements, their laughter like silver bells amid the din of war. He remembered one in particular, her handkerchief a flash of crimson as she dropped it from the wall. The memory was a shard of ice in his gut. The gate opening, the enemy pouring in, the slaughter of his comrades. The beginning of events that lead to Morthal's demise. He remembered their faces, trusting and brave, turning to him in confusion as the city's own betrayed them. He looked again at the 2 women before him, one a pragmatic killer from the gutters, the other a sorceress wrestling with a power she barely understood. They were nothing like the perfumed vipers of his past, not the women whose treachery had led to so much ruin. not the ones who had used him.
We must move.
Zira pleaded, her voice cracking.
We're running out of time.
Karma shook his head, forcefully dismissing the thought. He had trusted Zira's plea, and in the chaos that followed, both women had proven devastatingly capable, but to accept a woman as reliable, even trustworthy, the implication was too profound to accept. He shut it down. No, he thought firmly. A moment of clarity proves nothing against a lifetime of chaos. He turned to locate Balin, needing the dwarf's steadying presence, but the warrior was nowhere to be seen.
Where's Balin?
He demanded. Doreen shrugged.
Wasn't with us when we left the house. Probably checking the other buildings for beer.
Karma suppressed a surge of irritation. The dwarf was reliable in battle, but his tendency to wander off was problematic.
We don't have time.
Zira interrupted, her voice tight with urgency.
Please, we need to keep moving.
They moved forward, following the path up the hillside. Zira pushed ahead, practically running now. The closer they got to the tower, the stronger the pull became, a physical sensation in her chest, as if invisible hands were drawing her forward.
Hold on,
she thought desperately.
I'm coming. We're almost there.
They crested the hill, putting them at the base of the tower, a stark stone structure weathered by centuries of exposure. Its windows were dark, its door hanging askew on rusted hinges. And then, shattering the unnatural silence, came a sound that stopped Zira's heart. A roar, primal, ancient, and unmistakable. Her gaze snapped upward, following the sound to its source. Perched atop the tower was a massive green dragon, its scales gleaming like polished emeralds in the weak sunlight. Its wings were half extended, its long neck arched as it surveyed them with ancient, calculating eyes. Zira stumbled backward, her legs suddenly weak. The dragon's presence hit her like a physical blow, an overwhelming aura of age, power, and malevolence. All the urgency, all the desperate need to reach this place. And for what? To deliver themselves to a creature that would end their lives with a single breath? The cruel irony of it struck her like a physical blow. They had rushed here to save someone, only to find their own doom waiting with patient reptilian eyes.
By all the gods.
Doreen whispered beside her, her usual bravado evaporating. But Zira could only stare upward, transfixed by the ancient eyes that now fixed directly on her. In them she saw hunger.
We never had a chance,
she thought numbly.
This is the end of our journey. This is where it ends for all of us.
Kreidoprengen, lysgyntan, yn y ffin yn gweithio sbryn o'r gorwydd tan.